Hello everybody, my name is Chase here, and considering the fact that I talk about video games on the internet, I'm contractually obligated to state the following. Sonic has had a rough time in 3D. It's in the fine print. If there's one video game character that I feel has been affected by the internet the most, it is most certainly Sonic the Hedgehog. Poor bastard has been through the ringer over the years. I'm not saying it was never deserved, and I've added to that myself. Listen, I love the guy, just not unconditionally. I'm all for pointing out the flaws of the series, but I think the difference is that I do it is because I want Sonic to be good, and for Sega to learn from their mistakes instead of pushing it under the rug and pretending it didn't happen. You know, even if they do that anyway. While others do it more for the hell of it and to be cynical. And if you ask those people where they think Sonic went wrong, there's a 50-50 shot they'll tell you it's when the blue blur entered the third dimension, which is something I've never really agreed with. Sonic has had his fair share of bad games, but I don't think simply being 3D is what caused all of this. It's always been much more than that. You never really hear this with any other franchises either. Man, Metroid just can't work on the Wii. Wow, Zelda just can't work with motion controls. My marriage just can't work today. It's also ridiculous considering Sonic has worked in 3D, and many times at that. And while it's important to criticize the series when necessary, I think it's also important to show where they got it right, emphasize what worked and what didn't, so they can go from there. So let's go from the beginning and do just that. But first, context. So in the late 90s, Sonic was doing pretty well for himself. He had 4 hit games on the Genesis, some Saturday morning cartoons, and a shit ton of spin-offs. But then, as the years of the Genesis began to wane in popularity, mostly due to the ridiculous add-ons Sega was releasing, the 5th generation of video game consoles was starting to rear its weirdly polygonal head around the corner. The age of 3D gaming was beginning, with Nintendo and PlayStation leading the rounds with games like Mario 64, Crash Bandicoot, Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, and Final Fantasy VII, just to name a few. But oddly, not Sonic. As Sega's flagship console of that generation, the Sega Saturn, completely went without a mainline Sonic game for the entirety of its run. But it's not that they didn't try. Sonic's debut in 3D was originally supposed to be in the form of a game called Sonic Extreme. The game was supposed to use this weird-looking fisheye camera perspective to simulate a 3D space that would show the power of the Saturn. But fortunately for my eyes, this game was trapped in development hell for years, with 2 studios involved in its creation having conflicting ideas, being unable to actually get the game running on the Saturn's hardware, and being rushed by Sega to have a Sonic game for that holiday season. And while there was a fair amount of marketing for the game and even a playable demo at that year's E3, Sonic Extreme would be flat out cancelled, with Sega instead outsourcing to Traveler's Tales, which ended with us getting Sonic 3D Blast. I mean, technically this was the first 3D Sonic game, but I think I'll actually accept that when I die. False alarm. While it's sad that the effort of the studios went to waste, I can't say I'm disappointed that Extreme was scrapped. Just looking at this proof of concept makes me want to throw up. Why would you make the camera spin like that? Are you trying to compete with Nintendo on who can give the kids the most headaches? We did technically get something akin to a 3D Sonic game with Sonic Jam, which was a compilation disc of Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. Above being really good ports of these games that ran better than the originals, it included something called Sonic World, which was a mode where you could control Sonic in a 3D space. It really wasn't much. All you could really do was run around and collect rings, and there was only one level. It was basically a tech demo, but it was still an interesting look into what Sonic would look like in 3D in the future. And then came the Sega Dreamcast, releasing in 1999 with Sonic Adventure as its launch title. A game that would not only bring Sonic into the third dimension, but also redesign him for a new generation, including changing his eye color, starting one of the stupidest arguments to ever be conceived, right next to whether or not speed boosters ruin the franchise. Now, I don't actually own a Dreamcast, you know, because I have a Pulse. I would play the GameCube release, but honestly, if you're gonna play this game for yourself, then I would avoid this version. While it did improve certain aspects of the game, like the character models and frame rate, it introduced an insane amount of bugs and glitches that hinder your playing experience, and for some reason looks worse than the Dreamcast version. The extra polygons on the character models look good and all, but why is everything so goddamn shiny? It looks like everything got dipped in a vat of Vaseline. For this video, I'm gonna play the Steam release with the better SIDX mod. All this really does is change the models and textures back to their Dreamcast counterparts, fixes the lighting, and makes the game widescreen. In my opinion, this is the definitive way to play Sonic Adventure nowadays, whether or not you play the game already or not. The modding community has been holding up this franchise for years, so I don't feel too bad about using it. Well, with the mod installed and controller in hand, let's start with the story. So Sonic Adventure's story involves 6 playable characters, all with their own story, so I'll give the basic gist to start. The game starts with Sonic jumping across the rooftops of a city known as Station Square, but not failing to mention how this is indeed happening.
Oh yeah! This is happening!
But it isn't too long before he notices that a liquid monster known simply as Chaos, the god of destruction, seems to be giving the police force shit, with Sonic taking the creature down with not too much effort. It is then shown that Chaos is under the command of Dr. Robotnik, now known in the franchise as Dr. Eggman, which I still feel like is a worse name. Eggman is on the hunt for the 7 Chaos Emeralds to feed them to Chaos and hope that he will destroy Station Square while he will then build Robotnik Land on the rubble, the ultimate city. And he warns Sonic and Tails to not interfere with his quest, but considering that they didn't know that he was after the emeralds, maybe he shouldn't have just told them to begin with. So Sonic and Tails make it their mission to retrieve the emeralds before Eggman does, but as we see, they really suck at that. Not because they can't get them, oh no, they're pretty efficient on that front, but they keep losing them every single time they collect one. Half the time they just drop them and Eggman swoops in and takes them while they just sit back and watch. It's mind-boggling to say the least. Sonic, do something! But I guess it doesn't really matter, as after boarding Eggman's ship known as the Egg Carrier, Sonic makes quick work of the Doctor and foils his plans. But it's not too long after his defeat that Chaos decides to defect from Eggman's control and swipes all 7 Chaos Emeralds from under the hero's noses, transforming into his ultimate form, Perfect Chaos, which is an awesome looking design to say the least. Well, at least in cutscene. Perfect Chaos then completely decimates Station Square by flooding it. All seems pretty fucked, but as Tails points out, Chaos only used the negative energy of the emeralds, meaning that their positive energy is still intact. So Sonic uses that positive energy to become Super Sonic and takes down Chaos in a pretty fun boss battle, even if it's incredibly easy. Sonic's power actually ends up neutralizing Chaos, causing him to be good again, as he's actually a protector of these weird looking flying animals called the Chow. But after the tribe of Echidnas attacked the Chow hoping to take the Chaos Emeralds that they held for themselves, Chaos ended up absorbing the power of the emeralds and went on a rampage to protect them, with this girl named Call sealing her and Chaos inside the Master Emerald to stop the destruction. But both were released after Dr. Eggman shattered the Master Emerald near the beginning of the game. And after all is said and done, Call leaves with Chaos and everybody just kinda goes on with their lives. Well, you know, except for the people of Station Square. They are fucking dead. This entire plot is really weird and honestly kinda confusing. Sonic games have always been one to give more context to the adventure than your average Mario, but you can really feel it here, even if it's really not done that well. Each character has their own mini arc, so to say. Sonic is just about taking down Dr. Eggman. It's really no deeper than any of the Genesis games. Tails, despite spending most of his story alongside Sonic, is about him learning to be independent without his blue buddy by his side, as he realizes that he won't always be around. I would say this is probably the most well done out of all the stories, simply because of the fact that Tails actually gets some character development, and is affected in some way by the events of the game, even if it's really not that deep, and by the end doesn't really last that long. Knuckles' story is all about finding pieces of the Master Emerald after getting shattered by Eggman to get Angel Island floating again, you know, because God forbid this thing stays in the sky. This motherfucker, even after watching the Master Emerald get shattered by Eggman, still manages to get tricked like a dumbass that Sonic is the one to blame. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice in a row, maybe you shouldn't be the guardian of the Master Emerald, but, you know, that's just me. Amy is also here, making her first appearance since Sonic CD, where she befriends this bird that she vows to protect, as it's being hunted by a killer robot to capture the Chaos Emerald around its neck. This pretty much goes nowhere, as soon as her story ends, it just flies off and that's about it. We also have a new character by the name of E102 Gamma, who after having one conversation with Amy decides to switch sides and destroy other E101 robots. At the end of his campaign, Gamma actually dies, releasing the animal inside, who just kind of leaves to live a happy life. And then we have Big the Cat. You know what? I'll get to him later. He needs his own section.
Doggy, wait up!
I would say graphically, I think the game looks just fine, especially for an early Dreamcast title. Despite the occasional strange looking environments, especially when you're playing this game in full HD, or some pop-in, it's colorful, the models look like the characters they're supposed to be, and everything is perfectly clear and easy on the eyes. But the actual presentation and cutscene direction is fucking atrocious. Every character likes to pose weirdly as they stand around talking to each other, repeating the same idle animations over and over, and the lip syncing, while hilarious, never actually syncs to what they're saying.
Interfere! Or else!
Or else what, you big loser?
What a good comeback, Sonic.
The voice acting itself ranges from pretty good to fucking terrible. I do like the casting choices for each character, and I feel like they fit well, but I don't know if it was the direction or the large amount of silence in between, but I don't think there's a single line of dialogue that actually sounds natural.
Without more emeralds, the monster can't transform, so it's up to us to get the emeralds before Eggman does, huh?
Hold it right there, creep! You can't get away with this!
Chaos!
Oh man, what happened to that emerald we just had?
But I guess the quality doesn't really matter considering how bad the sound mixing is too. Most of the time the music is so fucking loud that I can barely hear the voices. Like, Jesus Christ, I might as well just start screaming.
But to just crash like that.
That was a test run using a new prototype propulsion system. It's got a few bugs to iron out.
What? Why not just use my plane?
So I'd say the story is pretty bad. It doesn't make sense, the characters are idiots, the presentation sucks, but it's hilarious, so I enjoy it. It does kind of cross into the so bad it's good area. There's just something about Sonic calling Chaos a big drip after having a crazy mouth spasm that makes me laugh, or anything Dr. Eggman says ever.
Get a load of this!
The only real issue I have with the game's story is the fact that they don't really have a good way of integrating the story of Chaos and the Echidna Tribe into the main plot, as they randomly just take you out of whatever you're doing to explain it to you. And because they need to have every character be informed about what's going on, you have to watch the same information be spoon-fed to you with every character, even when it's not necessary. Like, why does Big need to know Chaos's backstory? I don't think he knows his own backstory. And while it's cool you get to run into different characters in different stories, that means if they ever cross paths, you have to watch the same cutscene again with slightly different dialogue, and I really do mean slightly. It also means you have to fight the same bosses again, like in the case of Chaos 4, where because Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles are all present for that, they all have to fight it in their own separate stories. The boss isn't even that fun to fight in the first place. It is also annoying that in the original Dreamcast release you can't skip cutscenes, but in all the re-releases you can do just that if you want to jump right into the gameplay, which is probably something I should do by now. As I said, the game is split up among 6 playable characters, all with their own stories and gameplay styles. Jesus Christ. First, let's start with Sonic. He easily has the longest campaign as he goes through 10 of the 11 stages that the game has to offer. Pretty much everything Sonic could do in 2D, he can do just as well here, whether it's running fast, jumping, rolling into a ball, going through loops, or using the spin dash. Although in this game, the spin dash is really fucking broken, as you no longer have to be completely still in order to do it, and you can spam it as much as you want. Use it on an incline and skip massive chunks of the level. He's also got this new ability called the homing attack. If you press the jump button in midair, Sonic will home in on the nearest enemy for a quick kill. It's a great addition to Sonic's moveset. I've heard the argument that the homing attack adds too much automation to killing enemies, but honestly, I think that's ridiculous. Can you imagine playing Sonic Adventure where you had to meticulously jump on every enemy you see? Sure, it works, but the game might as well be a slideshow at that point. The homing attack keeps things moving, which is what I like about it, and it's also just fun to do. And overall, Sonic controls beautifully. He reacts correctly to the terrain. When you go downhill, you pick up speed, and going uphill makes you slow down. Isn't that right, Sonic 4, you jank piece of shit? He has good ground speed and acceleration without being slippery, and I rarely lose control of myself except for in Skydeck, cause fuck this level. Simply moving around is fun, and I think this might be the best Sonic has ever handled in 3D. It's so surprising that they got it so right on their first attempt. The only thing I don't like is when he's moving at top speed, it can be hard to control your direction left or right, which leads to Sonic kinda hugging the wall most of the time. It's a little awkward, but nothing I'll lose sleep over. This is paired with some of the best level design in 3D Sonic. If there's one game in this franchise that feels like a direct adaptation of the Genesis games in 3D, it's most certainly Sonic Adventure. Everything that made the 2D level design great is here and accounted for. Stages are very open-ended with plenty of multiple pathways to the goal ring and extra lives and rings to reward your curiosity. That with a good sense of speed that still leaves room for actual platforming makes for a damn good Sonic level. My favorite is easily Red Mountain, as every single time I play I find new routes and extra secrets. It's honestly impressive how well they managed to take the 2D gameplay and translate it to 3D without too much compromise. Well, I said too much. You don't go from level to level like the classic titles. Instead, we have 3 hub worlds that you must travel across and do things in to continue your adventure. We have Station Square, the Mystic Ruins, and the Egg Carrier. Now, I'm of the cynical belief that the only reason that these were included is because of the success of Mario 64. Okay, to be fair, they're really not that bad, and I don't mind them too much. 1, because they're insanely small, if sometimes a bit confusing. 2, what you actually need to do is never really that complicated. You just bring a key to a door, and it basically happens in 2 seconds because of the speed of the characters. And 3, there's a hint system that basically just tells you what you need to do. But while I don't find them intrusive, I also don't think they're really that necessary either. Mario 64 was a collectathon. It made sense that they needed Peach's Castle to connect all the levels together for when you needed to revisit them for convenience. There is pretty much no reason to come back to any of these stages, and even if you did, a level select like Sonic 3 would have worked just as fine. And it's not like you can do stages out of order either. Again, it's not a huge pace breaker or anything, but I'm kinda glad that the later games got rid of them. The biggest criticism I've heard when Sonic Adventure gets brought up is the camera. It gets stuck on things, doesn't give you a good view of what you're doing, and is kinda archaic. And yes, all of those things are true, but I also say, yeah, welcome to this era of video games. Criticizing an early platformer for having a bad camera is like criticizing a baby for crying. You kinda have to expect it at a certain point. That doesn't really mean that it's not an issue, because it is, but let's not act like Sonic came up with this. Have you played the original Tomb Raider? I don't think you've played the original Tomb Raider. Now that doesn't mean there's nothing wrong with Sonic's campaign or all the levels are fun. No, God no. Casinopolis is about playing pinball to win rings in order to reach the emerald at the end. And I wouldn't exactly call myself a pinball guy personally, especially in video games where I spend more time than necessary trying to get the ball where I want to go, but it just doesn't. I would rather just intentionally fall in the sewer areas and get my rings that way. It's a lot faster too. And while I enjoy the Nights into Dreams references, these sections hurt my fucking eyes. I feel like I'm watching Doctor Who. They also decided to bring back Sky Chase from Sonic 2, and it's fucking boring. You just sit on the plane and you shoot the projectiles. It's not even difficult. It's just really dull and goes on for way too long because the plane only moves at one set speed. That speed being agonizingly slow. And you have to play it twice in Sonic's scenario, 4 times if you also play as Tails, considering he was there with you. And then there's fucking Sky Deck. Easily the worst stage in the game. It doesn't even matter who you play as. It's filled with narrow walkways, so many bottomless pits, it goes on for too long, it's hard to see because of the cloud effects obscuring your view, and the whole rotation gimmick gives me a headache. It's also kind of disappointing that there's no special stages, which also means there's no way to play as Super Sonic in the regular levels, which is kind of a bummer. But overall, I'd say Sonic's gameplay is really fucking good. In fact, I'll go a step further and say it's great. It takes everything I liked about the 2D gameplay and applies it with the extra access. This is how I think Sonic should play in 3D, and for their first attempt, this is really impressive of what they are able to accomplish. Even with the annoying bits, I can always look forward to replaying these stages. So what's the issue?
We still have 5 more stories.
Oh boy, here we go. Next up we have Tails. His gameplay is all about racing to the finish against an AI opponent, which is usually either Sonic or, in the case of Speed Highway, Dr. Eggman. Tails' gameplay isn't bad by any means, it's just severely underdeveloped. Just like the classic titles, Tails can fly by holding the jump button in midair, but his flying in this game is miles better than it ever was in the 2D games. First off, he can fly insanely fast, even faster if you get the jet anklet, letting you basically blitz through every stage at the speed of light. And 2, while he will tire out after flying for too long like in the older games, he'll only tire out if you hold the fly button down, allowing you to glide very far distances without getting exhausted. And it's because of this that Tails' flight allows him to skip entire stages while your partner desperately rubber bands to try and catch up, which will never actually happen. I genuinely have no idea what losing looks like, because it's never happened. Why would it? Look at Tails playing Windy Valley. You never even have to touch the ground. As fun as it is to fly over everything, it can make Tails' stages feel very uninteresting and incredibly short, even if his flight is fun to control. Tails in 2D wasn't fun to play because he made the game easier. He was fun because his flight lent itself very well to exploration and finding secrets, which is something that didn't really translate into 3D. I think his story could have really benefited from having stages that were made specifically for him that could take advantage of his abilities. Speed Highway is actually a good example of this, as it's the only stage he doesn't completely break and complete in 15 seconds. And because of that, it's really fun to play through. I wish all of his stages were like this. But the way it is, Tails' stages, while not bad, are massively undercooked. It doesn't really feel like there was a lot of thought that went into how his flying would play out. I don't really have any issues replaying it, but I'm also not invested in it in the same way that I am about Sonic's campaign. Next, we have Knuckles. Knuckles' story is all about finding pieces of the Master Emerald after it gets shattered. His stages are confined to certain parts of the regular stages where he must use his gliding and wall climbing abilities to locate the emerald shards with a radar to help tell if you're close to a piece, and a hint system that practically just tells you where they are. I'll say this now. I'm not a big fan of Knuckles' gameplay style. I don't hate treasure hunting, but I also wouldn't really call it fun either. It's just kind of whatever. It is cool that Knuckles has all of his abilities from Sonic 3 and all, but looking for the emerald pieces is not really that interesting to do. You glide around until the radar goes off, you look around for a bit, grab the shard, and move on to the next one. And how long that actually takes to look around can be up to luck, because the actual shard locations are randomized every time you play them. So sometimes you can find them all right away without too much sweat, or you can be here for a really long time. time, just gliding around. I understand they couldn't just put him in regular stages, his abilities would break the game, but I don't really think this is a good substitute either. Like with Tails, I think they could have made it work by simply designing levels with Knuckles' abilities in mind, and they sorta did that here, but why couldn't it just be a regular platformer like everybody else? I'm overall indifferent to these stages. I don't hate them, but I don't like them either. If anything, I'm just glad that they're really short and don't take that much time. Now it's time for the new characters, starting with Amy, being the first time you actually get to play as her in the franchise. Like I said before, her story is about this bird that she vows to protect, so her levels involve trying to get to the gold ring while being hunted by a robot that wants to collect the bird for Dr. Eggman. Amy's levels are kind of like Sonic's, but like at half the speed. She can't spin dash, roll into a ball, or even jump on enemies altogether. In order to kill things, she has to use her hammer, which doesn't really feel that bad to do, but why is this the only way I can damage things? Why can't I just jump on shit? And all that is compounded with her horrible ground speed, which makes traveling through the hub world drag. Everybody else travels through here at the span of a second, but not Amy. I do like the move that she can do where she uses her hammer to jump really high, but there's never really a reason to do it in the first place other than to go slightly faster. Even with speed shoes, she's nowhere near as fast as the other characters, and it just makes her levels kind of boring and go on for way too long. I'm glad they actually had Amy do platforming, but not like this. The robot that hunts her doesn't even add too much to the gameplay either. It could have been great to add tension to going through levels, kind of like the SAX from Metroid Fusion, but I wouldn't really call it that much of a threat. If it finds you, you bop it on the head and go on your merry way, and that works about 98% of the time. It turns what could have been a really fun idea into a slight inconvenience whenever it shows up. To be fair, Amy has the shortest campaign with only 3 stages, so it doesn't take too long to complete. I wouldn't say I wanted to claw my eyes out or anything, but I wouldn't say I'm itching to replay them either. Once again, it's just kinda whatever. Next, we have the first of 2 completely new characters for this game, E102 Gamma. His story involves a lot of shooting shit, whether it's defenseless mechanical animals or other E101 robots, which for some reason he doesn't really have much of an issue with doing. Gamma actually has a timer that increases the more combos you get with his guns. I would say other than Sonic and Tails, I probably enjoyed Gamma's story the most. Getting combos is satisfying, and while he's not nearly as fast as the other characters, I still find his stages are fast-paced enough to not feel like a slog. Well, except for Hot Shelter where I fell through the floor, but that was kind of funny. But it's still just okay in my eyes. Similar to Tails, the limited timer pretty much means nothing. The time they give you is very generous, and I never ran out of time. His boss fights are also some of the easiest bosses I've ever fought in any video game. You just press the shoot button, and half the time you don't even need to move.
Oh, thank God. I thought I wasn't gonna make it.
And finally, we have Big the Cat. Big is a giant purple cat who lives in the middle of the woods and has a best friend named Froggy. Froggy ends up eating a piece of chaos, which causes him to run away with Big giving chase. His campaign is about catching Froggy by fishing. Yeah, fishing. It's not even exaggerated fishing like what Mario did to soccer. You sit on your ass, you cast your line, you wait for Froggy to take the bait. Why? Why would you take fishing, one of the most mind-numbing and boring hobbies on the planet, and put it in a video game that's about going fast, and make it mandatory, no less? You have to complete all 5 of his stages to reach the fight against Perfect Chaos. Who the fuck asked for this? You know, Super Mario 64 was pretty good, but you know what it really needed? Croquet. Even if you like fishing, it's not like it's a good representation of the hobby. Whether or not Froggy takes the bait is completely random. Sometimes he will, most of the time he won't, and in the meantime, you can also catch other fish, which is completely pointless, and it's infuriating when you accidentally hit one and have to reel it in before you can attempt to catch Froggy again. This is easily the worst part of the game, and the worst story by a mile. I understand they want a diverse set of gameplay styles for each character, but this is just too much. The only part of Big's campaign I enjoy is that for some reason you can just pick up the NPCs and chuck them across the map. I think that's hilarious. Okay, so just to summarize so you're still with me, I really like Sonic's campaign. Tails is fun but underdeveloped. Knuckles is boring. Amy is boring. Gamma is okay, and Big the Cat is, well, he's Big the Cat. Yup, that sounds like Sonic Adventure. I want to say right now that I enjoy Sonic Adventure a lot, and I had a lot of fun coming back to it. In fact, I will say that even after all the games that have come out since, this is still my favorite 3D Sonic game of all time. In my opinion, they nailed the style of gameplay that Sonic should have in the third dimension, and comes the absolute closest to recapturing the magic of the Genesis games. I genuinely believe that, and it seriously makes me sad that the adventure gameplay isn't going to be around for much longer. But then there's the rest of the game. It is very clear that this was a case of a little too many cooks in the kitchen. Sonic Team claimed that they wanted to make Sonic Adventure the biggest and most ambitious Sonic game to date, and well, mission accomplished, I guess. It was originally envisioned as an RPG with a very big emphasis on storytelling. I think if they just honed in on the great thing they had going with Sonic and simply added other characters to be similar with their own unique twists on the gameplay like Sonic 3 and Knuckles, I would be singing a much different tune here. And while I still say that I vastly enjoyed this game and still recommend it to any fan of the series who hasn't played it yet, even if you only play Sonic Scenario and nothing else, like I usually do when I play Sonic Adventure, I can't deny that the entire package is a bit of a mess, and because of that, I can't really bring myself to say I enjoy the game as a whole the same way I do the classic titles. There was definitely a lot of room for improvement, but did those improvements come? Well, we'll get there when we get there.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go do my taxes.